The millionaire's son had never walked until the day his father caught the housekeeper in an unbelievable moment. There are moments in life when we believe everything lies within our grasp, that with enough hard work and faith, we can map out every dream. Those were the early years of Destiny Williams, a young black woman raised in the gritty streets of Brooklyn, who always believed that diligence could rewrite her family's fate. Destiny dreamed of the day she'd graduate, land a stable job, buy her mother a small apartment, and send her little brother off to college. Every dawn found her jogging down narrow blocks, eyes fixed on the ashen sky framed by aging brownstones, silently promising herself she would never give up. She scavenged worn magazines from subway stations and attended free classes at the church, each small victory a brick in the foundation of a brighter future. But fate is never a straight line. One bone-chilling winter night, everything shattered. Destiny's father, the man she admired above all, suffered a fatal stroke, leaving her, her mother, and her brother to fend for themselves. A family that had barely scraped by plunged into an abyss of debt. Medical bills for her mother, tuition for her brother, and utility notices piled like mountains. Destiny folded away her college textbooks and dove headlong into survival. She took jobs at fast food joints, cleaned homes for affluent families, carried trays at upscale cafes, even swept stairwells in crumbling tenements. Anything to bring in a paycheck. Her hands thickened and cracked from dish soap. Her slender shoulders stooped under the weight of midnight shifts. Still, she bore it all without complaint, knowing each hard-earned dollar was a lifeline for her mother and brother. Yet, as life's pressures mounted, Destiny felt trapped in a relentless whirlpool. Night after night, she sat by the tiny window of her cramped apartment, gazing at the lonely stars over the city, searching for any flicker of hope. Her youthful dreams, once bright enough to light her soul, were now crushed beneath the weight of duty, poverty, and fear. Then one frigid, late autumn afternoon, just when she thought her faith had flickered out, hope arrived from the most unexpected place. Mrs. Ruth, the elderly neighbor Destiny had helped on occasion, knocked at her door. "Destiny, dear," she said, "I know a wealthy family on the Upper West Side looking for a live-in housekeeper and nanny. They pay well, but their child is a bit unusual. His mother passed away last year, and he hasn't spoken or walked since. If you need work, I can put in a good word." Destiny hesitated. She never imagined herself caring for the rich, especially when she still carried her family's burden. But rent was overdue, her mother was ill, and her brother's future hung in the balance. With no other choice, she nodded, her heart fluttering with vague dread. Yet she managed a grateful smile toward Mrs. Ruth. The next morning, Destiny donned her threadbare coat, tucked a homemade lunch into her faded tote, and slipped onto the northbound subway. The train swayed with exhausted commuters, each lost in their own silent struggle. Destiny pressed her forehead to the window, watching graffiti-scarred streets give way to gleaming glass towers, suited professionals, and rows of polished cars. When she stepped onto the Upper West Side sidewalk, it felt like another world. Broad, pristine sidewalks lined with amber-leaved trees. Boutiques where a single dress cost a month's family groceries. Before her rose a luxury apartment building with doormen in crisp uniforms and a lobby so immaculate it gleamed. Destiny tightened her grip on the tote's strap, drew in a steadying breath, and whispered to herself, "For my mother, for my brother, I have to be strong." Her footsteps echoed softly on the marble corridor as she approached an imposing mahogany door carved with intricate patterns. The entrance to the penthouse that would, in ways she could never yet imagine, change Destiny Williams's life forever. The heavy mahogany door swung open, and a cold breeze slipped in behind Destiny's steps, carrying with it the unsettled promise of a morning full of upheaval. She crossed the threshold, her heart hammering, not only with nerves but with the acute awareness of how small and out of place she felt in this alien world. The polished marble floor reflected the glow of the crystal chandelier hanging from the soaring ceiling, each footfall echoing like a note in a lavish concerto. Looking up, she found herself in a grand foyer so perfectly arranged it felt surreal. Paintings hung in precise symmetry. A plush charcoal gray velvet runner stretched before an electronic fireplace that glowed faintly in one corner, and sculpted white orchids stood in spotless pots, each petal immaculate. Alongside a sweeping spiral staircase sat an antique grand piano, its lacquered surface gleaming like glass, a silent reminder that here, destiny might as well be a speck of dust. This Upper West Side enclave, once only glimpsed through the pages of magazines or on her battered phone screen, now unfolded in living color. Luxury cars rolling by beyond the arched windows, high-end boutiques across the street, and well-heeled shoppers passing in and out with cool confidence. Destiny tightened her grip on the strap of her tote, palm slick with sweat. For a moment, she caught her reflection in a nearby mirror. A skinny black girl in a threadbare coat, hair tied back in a hurried knot. A lone brushstroke amid this masterpiece of excess. In that instant, she felt not just that she didn't belong, but a primal fear of the unspoken rules woven into every tile and breath of this home. If I break one of those vases, I'd owe more than 3 months' rent, she thought, her throat going dry. Before her panic could swell further, a calm, warm voice called from down the hall. "You must be Destiny, right?" It belonged to Mrs. Lorraine Blake, a short-haired, silver-haired woman whose steely gray-blue eyes spoke of both experience and authority. Clad in understated elegance and carrying a leather-bound book, she moved with the assured poise of someone used to orchestrating every detail of her life. But her smile at Destiny felt softer than anything else in the house. "Come on in," she said. "I've been expecting you. Don't worry. Once you settle in, you'll be fine." Just that tone and those eyes eased some of Destiny's trembling. Yet her footsteps remained tentative as she passed from object to object, as if afraid to disturb an unspoken sanctity. Mrs. Blake guided her along the corridor. "This penthouse was designed by my son, Matthew. He's obsessed with perfection. You'll see soon enough." The words fell like a gentle warning. Destiny dared not inquire further, but tucked them away in her mind. When they reached the living room, Destiny was struck by a frigid stillness emanating from its slate-gray walls, seeping into each expensive artifact. The vast space felt empty. Everything was so orderly that not a spark of real life remained. No family photos, no scattered toys, no hastily scribbled notes or draped coats. Though the chandelier's pale gold light bathed the room like honey, it lacked what every home needs most: warmth. What made her chest tighten wasn't just the wealth beyond her wildest dreams, but the sense that this place was a velvet tomb, showcasing perfection while burying every trace of intimacy. She could almost hear her own heartbeat, a hollow drum in the cavernous space. "Don't mind Matthew if he seems distant," Mrs. Blake murmured, indicating a leather armchair by the window. "He's suffered a lot of loss, but I believe one day he'll learn what truly matters beyond perfection." Destiny nodded, feeling both a sliver of relief and an intensifying apprehension about the real master of this domain. He was not merely a powerful, accomplished man. He was a soul encased in ice by his pain. One look or one curt word could reduce another person to insignificance. In the shadows near the staircase, Matthew Blake stood silently, observing through a reflective pane. He was tall, dressed in a flawlessly tailored gray suit, Ash-brown hair slicked back, lips pressed into a hard line. His presence alone wielded authority. No words needed. The room seemed to hold its breath around him. He regarded Destiny with a mixture of suspicion and haughty expectation, as though poised to pounce on any misstep. Yet behind those cold eyes lay a deep exhaustion, a wound that no one had soothed. To Matthew, everything in this house, including its staff, was merely part of his control map, nothing more. Just as Destiny felt herself suffocating between two worlds, the rigid hush of this sanctuary and the shattered dreams she carried, another door waited to be opened. The real trial was only just beginning. The very moment Destiny hadn't yet steadied her breathing in the suffocating luxury, a figure emerged from the staircase, each step measured, decisive, silent, yet somehow making the entire living room seem to pause. There stood Matthew Blake, tall, clad in a flawlessly tailored charcoal gray suit, his light brown hair slicked back, every feature of his face as sharply chiseled as marble. Everything about him radiated absolute control, from the way he slipped his hand into his pocket to the frosty glance he cast over Destiny, to barely perceptible press of his lips, all of it drawing an invisible line she dared not cross. But the most unsettling thing about Matthew was his eyes. Steely gray-blue, bright yet edged with barbs. His gaze was like a thin blade. It swept over her and left a cold cut beneath the skin. Behind that handsome facade lay wounds no one had touched. Whenever those eyes fixed on Destiny, she felt disdain, suspicion, and a warning, like a stain on this impeccably clean home. Mrs. Lorraine smiled and introduced her, but Matthew merely inclined his head. No polite smile, no handshake. He didn't ask Destiny a single question, only appraised her from head to toe, judging her fit for this inviolable space. "If Mother chose you, it must be all right," he said evenly, almost without feeling. "Just make sure you don't complicate things." Each word from Matthew sounded both like a greeting and a veiled threat to her presence here. Destiny squared her shoulders, refusing to look down. She met Matthew's eyes for one steady second, enough to see not only his coldness but the deep scar beneath. Someone once loved too fiercely, now wielding power and rules to shield his own pain. She offered a small, calm greeting. "Hello, Mr. Blake. I'm Destiny. I'll do my best." Matthew didn't reply. He turned back to his mother to ask briskly about schedules and safety rules, then disappeared down the hallway into his study. The door closed with a stark click that resonated through the room, an unbreakable barrier. The air felt heavier afterward. Destiny knew. To Matthew, she was just a replacement housekeeper, valuable only for maintaining order and cleanliness here. He didn't trust her, didn't care where she came from, or what dreams and sorrows she carried. To him, Destiny was an object that could be discarded the moment she erred. A mix of anger and hurt rose in Destiny's chest. She remembered her father's words. "No matter how others see you, walk with confidence. No one can take your worth away unless you let them." She vowed not to shed a tear, not to let herself be belittled, even in this icy mansion. Yet Destiny's very presence, the stark contrast of a young black woman from Brooklyn in Matthew's world, quietly stirred the long dormant waters here. Every time she moved about, cleaned, cooked, or simply shared a soft word with Mrs. Lorraine, Matthew sensed a strange imbalance, as if a single brushstroke of color had upset his meticulously controlled grayscale canvas. He was irritated, but couldn't stop watching her. Her steady patience and hopeful eyes became both his suspicion and his confusion. How could someone like Destiny dare to step into his realm, where he was used to drawing boundaries and pushing everyone away, especially anyone perceptive enough to see that beneath his proud mask lay a fragile, wounded soul. From that moment, a silent battle began. Destiny's courageous fight to survive for her family versus Matthew's cold, merciless defenses born of fear of loss. No one could know then that this seemingly routine introduction would spark the upheaval that would change both their lives forever. The heavy door to Samuel's room eased open, extending the weight of Destiny's encounter with Matthew into a new space. Though here, there was no aura of power, only a bone-chilling silence. Destiny stepped in, hand trembling slightly, eyes taking in the pastel-hued room, every object arranged as neatly and artfully as in an expensive magazine spread. The large room brimmed with natural light, pouring through a wide window overlooking the park. Sheer white curtains drifted in the faint breeze. Along one wall, shelves held dozens of stuffed animals, toy car models, and building blocks, pristine, untouched by any real childhood mess. In one corner stood a low bookcase stacked with fairy tales in English and French. Beside it, a watercolor easel and a full box of crayons still sat ready. Yet, in this playroom full of toys, not a single childhood sound floated through the air. No laughter, no running footsteps, not even the faint rustle of crumpled paper. The atmosphere was thick, cold, and suspended, as though time itself had frozen around the loneliness dwelling in every shadow. On the pale gray shag rug by the window, 4-year-old Samuel sat curled up. Fine blonde hair tousled, pale skin contrasting starkly with the oversized navy sweater draping his small frame. His deep gray eyes stared out the glass as if chasing something far away. In his arms he clutched a worn bunny plush whose ears were threadbare, his lone tether to reality. Destiny froze at the threshold, her heart tightening at the sight. In an instant, she sensed the child's isolation, his unspoken pain, and the invisible fear he carried. Motionless, unblinking, he seemed petrified, his spirit hollowed out by an ordeal no child should bear. Mrs. Lorraine approached quietly and laid a gentle hand on Destiny's shoulder. Her voice was soft and sorrowful. Since his mother passed, he hasn't spoken or walked. Every specialist, doctors, psychologists, has been powerless. Samuel has built an invisible wall no one can breach. Destiny felt stung in her own childhood memories. Nights her father was away, her mother up with her sick, the terror of being abandoned with no one to hear her cries. She looked at Samuel and saw, behind those glazed eyes, a small soul, trapped between a world of luxury and utter solitude. Gently, Destiny knelt beside him, keeping a respectful distance from his safe zone. She didn't speak. Instead, she placed her tote on the floor, produced a worn fairy tale picture book, and began turning its frayed pages. In a low, soothing voice, she recited the stories her mother once told her, letting the words lull Samuel like a gentle lullaby. He didn't glance her way. His body remained stiff, his grip on the rabbit tightening. Yet Destiny didn't give up. She stayed for a long while, gaze fixed on Samuel, offering the only warmth she could in this storybook-chic yet ice-cold room. From outside the doorway, Matthew watched in silence. His expression was heavier than usual, filled with both irritation and helpless despair. He observed Destiny and Samuel, two souls from different worlds, each imprisoned by their own invisible barriers, and felt a stirring of discomfort he couldn't name. The hush stretched on, seemingly unbreakable, but Destiny recognized that this silence wasn't emptiness. It was a suppressed plea for help, a fragile spirit yearning for a patient hand. Deep in her heart, she understood that pain all too well. She, too, had been a child no one heard, no one asked about, no one reached out to. And in that moment, Destiny vowed quietly to herself that no matter how long it took, she would find a way to bring Samuel back to life, whether through a single blink of connection, a tiny smile, or the softest, most reassuring touch of her hand. From the very moment Destiny stepped out of Samuel's silent room, she knew the real battle was only just beginning, and that her greatest opponent wasn't the loneliness of a frightened child, but the invisible walls built by adults, walls that Matthew Blake had cemented more firmly than anyone. Each morning before dawn, Destiny rose and moved through the house like a shadow. She polished every walnut tabletop, dusted each bookshelf, buffed every corner of the cabinets, meticulously rearranged the plush toys, inspected bed linens and the curtains, even smoothed the tablecloths until each fold lay perfect. Whenever she heard Matthew's footsteps descending the stairs, the air in the mansion seemed to grow colder, heavier, as if his presence sucked warmth out of the walls. Matthew never bothered with a good morning. Instead, he watched her with an assessing gaze, sometimes as icy as winter wind, sometimes a casual glance that masked a razor-sharp scrutiny. A single speck of dust, a stray drip on the kitchen counter, or a spoon left slightly askew could prompt one of his cutting reminders. How long did you leave that floor cleaner on the wood? The dishes in the dishwasher aren't dry. Check more carefully next time. Samuel's food needs finer cuts. Don't change the menu without permission. Each petty comment accumulated into an invisible weight on Destiny's shoulders, keeping her in a constant state of vigilance, never knowing when one misstep might cost her her job. Getting near Samuel proved even tougher. Whenever Destiny tried to sit beside him, he either retreated further into his own world, or Matthew would reappear unannounced, eyes narrowing in suspicion and frustration. Frustration he didn't even recognize in himself. At times, if she lingered too long telling a story or sang him a lullaby too softly, Matthew would step in with a curt frown. Leave him alone. Don't complicate things. Let the doctors handle it. Matthew's need to control extended far beyond the kitchen, cleaning, or Samuel's daily routine. He'd patrol the house, checking every cupboard and trash bin, demanding to know why she chose one brand of soap over another. Not a day passed without Destiny feeling under the microscope, judged like an outsider clinging to ground that was never hers. Often, exhaustion and humiliation left her on the verge of packing up and leaving in the middle of the night. Especially after he'd chastised her for making Samuel cry during a simple story time. The baseless blame stung, and she wondered if she had the strength to endure this harsh world. In those darkest moments, Destiny retreated to the tiny maid's quarters at the end of the hall and called home. Her mother's frail but loving voice would crack through the line. "My daughter, your father's gone, and your brother and I are counting on you. I know it's hard, but our family will survive if you don't give up." And her little brother's determined promise, "Destiny, as long as you stay, I'll study my hardest. Someday we'll have a better life." Those simple words were the spark that kept her burning. She knew that if she could just hold on, if she refused to let Matthew's coldness extinguish her hope, things might yet change. But each day brought new trials. Matthew's aloofness wasn't merely an attitude, it was a fortress built from his own losses and unhealed wounds. Destiny sensed it in every sigh he thought no one heard, in every tight line around his eyes when he believed she wasn't watching. Once, she overheard him on the phone in his study, his voice rough as he spoke of Samuel. "No, my son doesn't need friends. Stick to the treatment plan and don't ask about his mother again." That trembling edge in his tone, a mix of anger and helpless fear, revealed the terror beneath his icy veneer, the fear of loss and of failing to protect the one he loved most. Destiny realized then that her presence, a poor black girl from Brooklyn, was the one unpredictable piece in Matthew's carefully ordered world. It made him uneasy, compelled him to scrutinize and test her, hoping she'd quit on her own so he could close his private domain forever. But Destiny, with her quiet resolve, her growing bond with Samuel, and her love for the family she'd left behind, chose to stay. To face those stifling days and the relentless coldness of Matthew's gaze, because deep down she believed that even the firmest walls could be broken. The days blurred together in the penthouse like frozen moments. Every movement, every breath, every sound seemed to slow under the weight of the invisible pressure that Destiny felt so keenly. The suffocation came not only from the endless, repetitive chores, but from a growing fear in her heart, the fear that she would never truly reach Samuel. After only a few attempts at connection, Destiny discovered something that broke her heart. Samuel was terrified of being touched. If anyone came too close, especially an adult, he would shrink inward, clutching his worn bunny toy so tightly, eyes wide as if bracing for something terrible. He recoiled from hugs, trembled if anyone laid a hand on his shoulder, and even jerked back when Destiny tried to move a book near him. The first time she tried singing him a lullaby, a gentle melody her own mother had sung to soothe her, Samuel stared blankly, then suddenly squeezed his rabbit, face ashen, breathing ragged, and let a single tear slide down his cheek. Destiny fell silent. She understood that Samuel didn't hate her. He was just afraid of anything tied to adults, of the closeness every child deserves yet never experienced. As soon as Matthew heard the faint song drifting from Samuel's room, he appeared, face hardening as if he'd just caught a grave mistake. "What are you doing? Nobody needs lullabies here. Don't take the liberty of consoling or changing anything." "I only wanted to help Samuel feel more comfortable. Just follow the doctor's orders. Don't bring your own emotions in here." His gaze cut like a blade, cold and tinged with frustrated anger. For Matthew, control wasn't merely habit, it was his only defense, the armor he'd built around unspoken losses. In his eyes, any small change posed a threat to the fragile world he'd constructed for his son, and for himself. From that point on, Destiny's every move was micromanaged. She could read only certain short stories, allow Samuel to play only with toys Matthew had pre-approved, and stay in his room only during strictly set hours. If anyone else entered, she had to leave immediately. Even meal prep was bound by a rigid menu. No creativity allowed, not even a star-shaped apple slice. Yet the worst part wasn't the rules. It was witnessing Matthew terrify Samuel to the point of shaking. One weekend afternoon, Samuel accidentally spilled orange juice on the rug, a tiny mishap. But Matthew stormed in, eyes dark, voice sharp. "Samuel, how many times have I told you to be careful? This room isn't for destroying." The boy panicked, curling in on himself, lips quivering, hands over his head as if bracing for a storm. Destiny rushed forward to shield him, but Matthew's glare stopped her cold. "Step back. We don't need any heroes here." Samuel's soft sobs filled the air, barely a sound, yet choked in his throat. Destiny felt helpless, watching the man who seemed impervious to pain become the very source of the boy's greatest fear. Tears welled in her eyes, but she turned away, biting back the words she knew would change nothing. That night, in her small room at the end of the hallway, Destiny sat by the window, staring into the darkness. She was no longer strong. Tears soaked her pillow as the helplessness, anger, and sorrow of seeing Samuel so terrified twisted in her chest. She wondered if she truly had the strength to see this through, because it wasn't just Samuel who needed saving, but Matthew, trapped in his own psychological darkness where control only shattered things further. Then, from the depths of her childhood memory, her father's voice whispered, "Sometimes light comes only when you dare to step through fear. No one can save you but yourself." Destiny wiped her tears and made a silent vow. Tomorrow she would begin again, refusing to give up. Because if no one stayed by Samuel's side, who would lead him out of this darkness? The next morning, Destiny awoke early as always, her eyes still puffy from tears, but her face firm and determined, with not a crack in her resolve. She slipped through the silent hallway, rain pattering against the windows, shrouding New York City in a heavy gray haze. Inside the penthouse, every sound seemed muted, and the air thick with nameless weight. But within Destiny burned a small flame, an unspoken stubbornness no hardship or tears could extinguish. She thought of Samuel's ashen face and the way he closed his eyes whenever adults raised their voices. His fear mirrored the child she had once been, the child who waited for someone brave enough to stay and truly care. That morning, after finishing her chores, Destiny entered Samuel's room as usual. He sat by the window, clutching his old bunny, eyes fixed on the rivulets of rain sliding down the glass. In days past, Matthew's constant warnings, controls, and rules had kept her hesitant, but today, beneath the downpour outside, Destiny felt a clarity. If no one dared to break this cycle, Samuel would remain trapped in his icy cage forever. Gently, she pulled a small, bright green hand puppet, a goofy dinosaur she'd saved up to buy at a flea market, out of her coat pocket. Keeping a respectful distance, she spoke softly, "Hey there, anyone up for a dinosaur story today?" Samuel didn't turn around, but Destiny pressed on. She began to tell a tale in a silly voice, making the puppet dance and roar in ridiculous fashion, until, with a sudden slip, the dinosaur tripped on a banana peel and fell flat on the rug, flailing its arms as if in pain. "Oh no, dinosaur slip, ouch!" She let out a playful whimper, then had the dinosaur struggle to its feet, grimacing, and shuffle toward the bunny Samuel held. And then it happened. Soft as a breeze through a cracked door, as small as a raindrop falling in silence. Samuel let out a tiny laugh, at first barely more than a breath, then a genuine little chuckle. His eyes widened, a faint spark of joy lighting them, though his lips pressed together as if afraid to cross some unseen boundary. Destiny held her breath, daring nothing more than a gentle smile. She kept up the puppet's antics, this time staging a dramatic tumble into the bunny's lap, and they all laughed together. Samuel covered his mouth but couldn't hide the little shakes of his shoulders. Joy, however fleeting, had reached him. In that laugh, Destiny knew she'd cracked the thickest shell around his heart. What Destiny didn't realize was that, outside the door in the dim hallway, Matthew Blake had been standing silent for some time. Leaning against the wall, rigid, he peered through the narrow opening. That tiny laugh echoed farther and louder than any sound in the house had in over a year. For the first time in a long time, Matthew felt a wave of confusion. Astonishment mingled with doubt, equal parts joy and fear. He dared not step inside. Part pride, part disbelief that a mere housekeeper he had always dismissed could touch his son's heart with something so simple. Deep inside, tumultuous questions surged. Had he been wrong all this time? Were his rigid rules and strict control the very barriers driving Samuel further away? Silently, Matthew turned and walked away, carrying those tangled emotions with him. He didn't know whether to feel anger, relief, or shame. His long-hidden weakness and helplessness laid bare by a brief, innocent laugh. But for Destiny, that moment planted a seed of hope. In the penthouse's oppressive gloom, a sliver of light had finally pierced through, fragile yet not easily snuffed out. She didn't expect a miracle, but she knew this. As long as she persevered, as long as there was laughter, there would be a chance to free Samuel from his lonely cage. The days in the penthouse stretched on like frozen moments. Every movement, every breath, every sound seemed to slow under the crushing weight Destiny felt so keenly. The suffocation came not only from the endless chores, but from a growing fear in her heart that she might never truly reach Samuel. After only a few attempts, Destiny discovered something that broke her heart. Samuel was terrified of any touch. If an adult came too close, he would shrink into himself. Clutching his ragged bunny so tightly, eyes wide as though waiting for something terrible to happen, he recoiled from hugs, trembled if anyone touched his shoulder, even flinched away when Destiny simply tried to bring a book within reach. The first time she tried singing him a lullaby, a gentle tune her mother used to soothe her, Samuel stared blankly, then suddenly squeezed his rabbit, face drained of color, breath ragged, and a single tear slipped down his cheek. Destiny fell silent. She understood. Samuel didn't hate her. He was terrified of the very closeness every child deserves. The moment Matthew heard her singing drift from Samuel's room, he appeared, face darkening as if she'd committed some grave offense. "What are you doing? No one needs lullabies here. Don't take it upon yourself to comfort him or change anything." "I only wanted to help Samuel feel more at ease. Just follow the doctor's orders. Don't bring your own feelings into this." His gaze was as sharp as a knife, cold, laced with frustrated anger. For Matthew, control wasn't mere habit. It was the only defense he had, the armor he'd built around unspoken pain. To him, any small change threatened the fragile world he'd crafted for his son and for himself. From then on, Destiny's every move was restricted. She could read only approved short stories, let Samuel play only with toys Matthew pre-screened, and stay in his room strictly during allotted hours. If anyone else entered, she had to leave at once. Even mealtimes were bound by an unyielding menu. No creativity allowed, not even cutting an apple into a star. But perhaps the cruelest blow wasn't the rules. It was the afternoon she watched Matthew terrify Samuel into shaking. One weekend, Samuel accidentally spilled orange juice on the rug. A tiny mishap, but Matthew stormed in, eyes blazing, voice snapping. "Samuel, how many times have I told you to be careful? This room isn't for making messes." The boy panicked, curling in on himself, lips quivering, hands covering his head as if huddling from a storm. Destiny rushed forward to protect him, but Matthew's glare stopped her cold. "Step back. We don't need any heroes here." Samuel's muffled sobs filled the silent room. Destiny felt helpless watching this man, once seeming invincible, become the source of his son's greatest fear. Tears stung her eyes, but she looked away, biting back the words that would change nothing. That night, in her tiny quarters at the end of the hall, Destiny sat by the window, staring into the darkness. She wasn't strong anymore, her pillow soaked with tears, as anger, helplessness, and grief knotted in her chest. She wondered if she truly had the strength to see this through, because it wasn't just Samuel who needed saving, but Matthew, trapped in his own dark prison, where control only deepened the wounds. Yet from the depths of her memory came her father's voice. "Sometimes light appears only when you dare to step through fear. No one can save you but yourself." Destiny wiped her tears and vowed. Tomorrow she would begin again, refusing to give up. Because if no one stayed by Samuel's side, who would lead him out of this darkness? The moment Destiny's door clicked shut behind her, tears still wet on her cheeks, the penthouse grew even heavier. A tense silence spread through every room, like the onset of the longest night. Destiny felt all her hard-won effort slipping away in an instant, every fragile hope swept aside by a cold, merciless storm. But in that stillness, Mrs. Lorraine, who had watched silently until now, decided she could stand by no longer. She strode into Matthew's study, where he stood alone by the window, shoulders trembling with anger or exhaustion. She couldn't tell. She didn't mince words or offer empty comfort. "Matthew, you think you're protecting Samuel by controlling everything, but you're really punishing yourself and pushing your son further from the love he needs most." Matthew turned, eyes rimmed red, his first true display of confusion and hurt behind that cold facade. "You don't understand. If anything happens to Samuel, if I lose him like I lost Anna, I wouldn't survive." Mrs. Lorraine stepped closer, placing a firm, gentle hand on his shoulder. "Your fear has made you a stranger to your own son. Samuel needs a father who dares to love, not a warden. Sometimes the only way to become stronger is to admit you're weak." Her words cracked the final piece of the wall Matthew had built around himself. He lowered his head, his legs no longer steady. The pride that had shielded him from loss lay shattered. In that vulnerable moment, Matthew saw that he had not only hurt Destiny, the only person brave enough to enter Samuel's world, but had become the source of his own son's fear and loneliness. That night, as Destiny sat motionless in her room, a quiet knock came at her door. Matthew appeared, no longer bearing his usual rigid composure. He entered and stood in silence for a long moment before speaking, not in commands, but in a plea of desperation. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was just so terrified. I didn't know how to save Samuel. I can't bear to lose anyone else. I thought controlling everything would protect him, but instead, I only made things worse." Destiny was stunned. Behind that cold, authoritarian exterior stood a father, broken by helplessness and haunted by his own failures. His eyes now held emptiness, powerlessness, and the deepest fear. Silently, Destiny sat beside him, hands clasped together. She told him of her own childhood, of her father's sudden passing, of her mother and brother struggling in their run-down apartment, of nights spent wide awake in pain and fear, knowing that one unforeseen tragedy could cost them everything. "I used to believe that if I controlled everything, if I never let myself be weak, I could hold on to what I loved. But I learned that only patience and the courage to share our fears can help us overcome the loss we dread." Destiny's simple, heartfelt words, free of blame, served as a balm for Matthew's long-suppressed wounds. Side by side, two people from opposite worlds found they shared the same pain, the terror of losing family and the burden of feeling they must face it alone. After that night, a quiet transformation took hold in the penthouse. Matthew began to see Destiny with new eyes. For the first time, he sought her input on Samuel's schedule, listened to her gentle suggestions for meals, routines, and even the light exercises he had once forbidden. The harsh commands and vigilant glares vanished, replaced by cautious but genuine trust. And for the first time, Destiny felt true partnership in the fight to bring Samuel back into the light. Together they sat down and planned the days ahead, the little games, the gentle workouts, new books to read, the bedtime stories to share. These small steps marked the most important beginning of all, the start of a healing journey that no longer required either of them to stand alone. After that night of tears and honesty, a new atmosphere quietly spread through the penthouse. Gone were the wary glances, the dry commands, and the invisible distance dividing the three of them under one roof. In their place came small, simple signs of revival. Most importantly, Matthew's first true initiative. The next morning, it was Matthew who brewed the coffee, setting a cup down beside Destiny as an unspoken thank you. He didn't remain holed up in his study as usual. Instead, he approached Samuel and Destiny, asking how Samuel's morning had been, what he liked to eat, what stories he enjoyed. Though awkward at times, his gaze was gentler than Destiny had ever seen. In the days that followed, Destiny no longer tiptoed around every little decision. She organized activities for Samuel with confidence, and to her surprise, Matthew joined in, once assembling Lego with her and his son on the living room floor. Another time, fumbling to chop vegetables in the kitchen, then blushing with laughter when Destiny teased him about cutting carrots into giant slices. One afternoon, under soft sunlight, Matthew carried Samuel out onto the balcony. The three of them sat on the lounge bench, pointing out sparrows hopping on the railing, naming the passing clouds, telling stories about the bright red bus rumbling by on the street below. For the first time in months, the house rang with gentle laughter, and the everyday chatter only a real family shares. Destiny became the heart of every connection. No longer just the housekeeper, she gradually earned Matthew's genuine respect. He asked her opinion on new menus, listened when she suggested light exercises and outdoor discoveries for Samuel. Mrs. Lorraine, too, looked at Destiny with gratitude and pride, knowing silently that Destiny had not only saved Samuel, but had also touched Matthew's heart. Samuel's revival unfolded slowly but unmistakably, like a miracle. He began to utter his first syllables. Small words like ma, da, cake, and sis rang out, filling the house with joy. One day, Samuel bravely held onto a chair to stand, then waved Destiny over with a hoarse but determined voice. Each time, Samuel smiled at his father or nestled close to Destiny to hear a story, Matthew felt a sting in his eyes. He realized that true happiness didn't lie in perfect control, but in those tiny moments, each warm hug, each trusting glance Samuel gave him, to Destiny and to their home. In just a few weeks, the once icy penthouse had become surprisingly warm. Mornings fragrant with toast, the living room strewn with Lego bricks and colored pencils, the balcony sparkling in the afternoon sun to the sound of a child's laughter. Destiny no longer felt like an outsider here. She had become its heart, the pulse that connected each member, the keeper of hope, inspiration, and new life, in a home that had once felt like a velvet tomb. And from that point on, Matthew not only felt gratitude, but began to admire her. He learned to listen, to share his deepest thoughts with Destiny. He understood that the journey to bring Samuel back, and to heal their family, truly began when they dared to trust, to put aside fear and pride, and reach out for one another's hand. It seemed as though the sparks of hope and the laughter of a child had warmed the penthouse for so long, but when the rainy season returned, New York donned its familiar cold gray cloak once more. That evening, thunder rumbled across the sky, and sheets of rain lashed the windows, threatening to wash away every new ember of warmth under the Blake roof. Suddenly, the entire apartment plunged into pitch darkness as the lights went out. Thunder boomed, wind howled through the cracks, and Samuel trembled and began to cry in the strange darkness. Destiny scooped him into her arms, soothing him with gentle reassurances, while Matthew rummaged for a flashlight in the kitchen drawer. Mrs. Lorraine lit a few old candles, and they huddled together in the soft, golden glow. In that space, with the wind screaming outside, all the boundaries of rank, past hurts, control, and suspicion melted away. leaving only the rare intimacy of people who had once been strangers. After his tears spent themselves, little Samuel nestled into Destiny's lap, his hiccuping sobs fading into sleep. Matthew sat beside them in silence for a long time, his gray eyes reflecting the exhaustion of someone who'd fought inner storms for far too long. The candlelight highlighted the hard lines of his face, yet couldn't conceal the uncertainty in those eyes, strong and yet deeply frail. On that rainy night, as if by fate, Matthew spoke aloud for the first time the words he'd never dared share with anyone else. "You know, I used to think I was the strongest person alive. I took pride in everything I built, our happy family, until that terrible night. Anna, my wife, was gone in an instant. Everything collapsed. I still hear the shattering glass, smell the blood, ring of the ambulance siren. I couldn't do anything. I stood there powerless, watching the person I loved most slip away forever." His voice dropped to a whisper. "After the funeral, all I felt was rage and guilt. Samuel, he was too small to understand, but every time he looked at me with his mother's eyes, I saw only my own failure. I was so afraid I only knew how to control and set rules, thinking that would protect us, but I only made things worse." Destiny fell silent at the raw honesty of his pain. In the flickering candlelight, she saw someone she barely recognized beneath the impenetrable mask. A man lost in memory and unnamed sorrow, a father tormented by his own helplessness. Gently, she took his hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze, then softly shared her own story, of nights in a cramped, dark apartment, of rain leaking through the roof, of her mother's cough echoing through the still hours, and the daily fear of losing her family and her only home. "I grew up in the darkness of poverty, always afraid I'd lose my mother, my brother, or the only roof I had. Sometimes I thought I had to freeze my feelings just to survive. But I learned that only when we dare to open our hearts, to embrace our weakness and pain, can we truly receive the good things we deserve." Her simple, heartfelt words became the anchor for Matthew's wounds. Their eyes met across the candlelight, and all barriers fell away. Two wounded souls realizing they'd found a haven of peace where they could finally rest, and someone who truly understood the weight they carried. Outside, the rain softened. The wind no longer battered the windows. Inside the apartment, that newfound closeness became an unspoken promise. They would not let life's storms wash away the fragile trust they'd kindled, and they would not turn away from this second chance fate had so rarely granted to hearts so weary. When the stormy night finally passed, the penthouse seemed to burst into life under the first rays of morning sunlight. Destiny woke to find Samuel still sleeping peacefully beside her, and Matthew seated at the breakfast table with haunted, deep-set eyes, evidence of another restless night. The weariness had faded, replaced by a fierce resolve as though he'd just emerged from a long internal battle. After breakfast, Destiny hesitated, then shared the idea she had been nurturing, a decision that might forever alter Samuel's fate. "I've read about a special therapy center in Seattle. There, experts use a multi-sensory approach, combining music, animal interaction, and movement therapy for children who've experienced trauma like Samuel's. I believe if he could be in a new environment, spend time with animals, hear natural music, a miracle could happen." Matthew listened in silence for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window where the morning light streamed in. In the past, he would have dismissed such a proposal outright, denying any change to his carefully laid plans. But now he understood. To truly save his son and himself, he had to trust, to overcome his fear of failure. Slowly, he nodded and reached for Destiny's hand, feeling at last the steady heartbeat of a determined father. Let's try. We'll go all the way together, whatever the outcome. Within a week of preparations, the three of them, accompanied by Mrs. Lorraine, set off for Seattle. On the plane, Samuel was still quiet, but his eyes held life, and his tiny hand no longer clutched the old bunny so desperately. Instead, he gently touched Destiny's or Matthew's finger now and then, as if making a silent promise. The therapy center lay amidst lush pine forests outside the city, its bright spaces alive with birdsong. There, Samuel met friendly golden retrievers, was guided through music rooms, engaged in gentle movement with balls and swings, and listened to soft guitar music in the physical therapy suite. Destiny and Matthew took turns by his side every day, cheering on every small step, every sign of progress. A lifted gaze, a tentative smile, a braver sigh. On the first day, Samuel remained withdrawn, allowing only the most necessary touch. Yet the warm atmosphere, the playful dogs, and the soothing morning music gradually healed his wounds. After several patient sessions, Samuel surprised everyone by picking up a ball himself and sitting up on the mat without support. Matthew watched with tears in his eyes. He dared not blink, afraid the happiness would vanish if he looked away. Destiny slipped her arm around his shoulders and whispered, "You've already saved your son, Matthew, because you dared to trust and let go." By the 10th session, in the golden Seattle afternoon light, Samuel suddenly rose, wobbled a few steps, and looked toward Destiny and Matthew with bright, shining eyes. Then, in a trembling voice that filled the room, he whispered, "Mommy." At that moment, Destiny and Matthew both burst into tears, tears of joy, faith, and the reward for all their silent efforts. Samuel ran into Destiny's arms first, then clung to Matthew, calling out again, "Mommy, Daddy." In that cry, years of hurt, anger, fear, and guilt were washed away. Samuel had not only found his voice, but he had also given Destiny and Matthew a new beginning, the chance to be true parents, to start over, to live authentically with love and emotion. For Destiny, Samuel's first mommy was the miraculous proof of perseverance, compassion, and unbreakable hope. For Matthew, it was liberation, the greatest forgiveness for past mistakes, and the miracle that allowed him to let go of all control and open his heart to life's greatest gift. And in that instant, the therapy center ceased to be a distant institution. It became the home of three souls, once lost and wounded, now reborn together. From the moment Samuel called Mommy in that Seattle therapy center, the three of them were never the same. Light and life ignited in every look, every breath, every hand squeeze on the flight back to New York. Destiny sensed a new Samuel, no longer terrified to hide in the shadows, but brave enough to smile, speak, walk, and truly call his parents by name. Back at the penthouse, the once cold, heavy atmosphere now overflowed with laughter, warmth, color, and the simple sounds of a real home. Mornings found Samuel racing around the living room, his little feet clicking on the hardwood, then scrambling onto a chair to demand that Destiny read him a story, that Matthew draw a superhero, or that Mrs. Lorraine water the balcony plants. The walls of control had fallen. In their place were framed drawings, taped-up artwork everywhere, and soft music playing every evening as the family dined together. Matthew, once a man hidden behind a hard, emotionless shell, now paused to listen, to hug his son, and to share every small worry or joy with Destiny. He began planning family picnics, preparing weekend breakfasts with his own hands, even baking cookies, albeit messily, to Destiny's teasing laughter as flowers scattered across the floor. The closer they grew, the more Matthew realized that happiness isn't about control or avoiding pain, but about opening your heart, facing it, and forgiving yourself and your loved ones. He was grateful to destiny, not only for saving Samuel from the brink, but for teaching him again what hope, forgiveness, and new beginnings really mean. One spring afternoon, when lavender blooms filled the market stalls, Matthew led Destiny and Samuel to a small white house in the northern suburbs. It had a welcoming porch, fields of pale purple flowers, and a broad yard where Samuel could run freely under the sun. After a simple picnic among the blooms, Matthew knelt, took out a small ring, and looked into Destiny's eyes, bright with joy and misty with tears. "You brought light back into this family, taught me what love, courage, and faith truly are. Destiny, will you marry me, be Samuel's mother, and be our home?" Words failed Destiny as tears streamed down her face. She nodded, then the three of them embraced, their simple, profound happiness bursting into the warm spring air. From that day on, the little house by the lavender fields became Samuel's haven of love and growth, and the place where Matthew and Destiny healed old wounds together as they built a new future. Cozy dinners, laughter-filled mornings, family vacations, all stood as proof of the enduring power of love, the unquenchable flame of hope, and the truth that no matter how thick the darkness, a single spark and an outstretched hand can lead us back into the light. Destiny, Matthew, and Samuel's story ends in a perfect, happily ever after. But it's also a reminder of the power of hope, perseverance, and forgiveness. Sometimes miracles don't come from grand gestures, but from a child's laugh, a timely helping hand, or the courage to change. What do you think is the most important ingredient for a wounded family to truly heal and find happiness again? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share this story with someone you care about, and subscribe so you won't miss our next touching tale. Thank you for being with us and listening.